For those of you who've been following the channel since the beginning, my OGs, you know I used to do a weekly hot takes video every Wednesday, and I stopped doing that a while back because I felt the content was getting a little redundant to do on a weekly basis, but I do still occasionally do these hot takes videos because I love getting you guys involved in the content, and given we haven't done one of these in months, and given there has been a lot that has changed with this team and how they're playing as of late, and also given it's a Wednesday, I thought what better time than to do a hot takes video where I react to your guys' hottest Bulls takes. And for those that are new to the channel, first of all, welcome, be sure to subscribe, but feel free to leave your hot takes in the comments below to be featured in a future video. But with that said, let's get into some of these takes, shall we? So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, I got a lot of submissions for this one in this go around, much more than I anticipated, and some of them were very similar takes, so I tried to consolidate themes where I could, so I do apologize if I didn't get to yours, as I didn't want to make this an hour-long video. But let's start with this first take that I thought was interesting, and it comes from Daddy Donut. The take was Trey Jones should be prioritized over Ayo Dosunmu in terms of contract. It's interesting because the Bulls are going to have some tough decisions to make this summer, not even just with Trey Jones and who they should be prioritizing, but also how much they pay Josh Giddey to extend him as a restricted free agent. Do they extend Coby White, who is extension eligible this summer, or have him play out the final year of his deal to see if he can replicate what we're currently seeing? They have all these guards, all of which are either about to become free agents or extension eligible this summer, and they obviously can't pay all of them. But that topic really deserves a video in and of itself, which I'll do once we hit the offseason. But as for this take, so Ayo has one more year left on his deal, but like Coby, he is extension eligible this offseason. Obviously, Ayo is on a killer deal for the Bulls, that is, where he's making well below his overall production, and because of that, like Coby White, he's going to command more money in a new contract than what he's currently making. And then when it comes to Trey Jones, he's actually an unrestricted free agent this summer, so he can sign wherever he wants in the offseason. He can get an offer from any team, and the Bulls would not be able to match any offer to retain him, unlike with Josh Giddey, who is a restricted free agent this summer, and the Bulls have more control over his impending free agency. Now, when it comes to prioritizing one over the other, I mean, I love Trey Jones. He's been my favorite new addition on this Bulls team. I think he's incredibly underrated. He plays with energy, passion, he stays calm under pressure, high basketball IQ, and I don't think we can underestimate the impact he brought in those few games where Josh Giddey was out and helping the team actually win games and showing up well big time in the fourth quarter. So I'm not saying this is a wrong take, and I can actually see the argument behind it, but I do see more long-term value in Ayo Dosunmu over Trey Jones. And if we're going to prioritize one player over the other, I actually think it makes more sense to retain Ayo. Unless, of course, you trade Ayo for good value, then that changes things, because if you're able to get something in return for him, then you move him, that gets you one of your guards off your roster, and then you can extend Trey Jones for hopefully a relatively cheap deal. So I guess if you're phrasing it in that way, prioritizing Trey Jones by moving Ayo Dosunmu, but you mentioned from a contract perspective, and if we're looking at contracts specifically, I would still look to pay Ayo over Trey Jones. Now, the Bulls could always extend Trey Jones on a short-term deal, let Ayo play out the final year of his contract, see how he responds post-shoulder injury. That way, it gives you a full season worth of data to see who it makes more sense to keep, and the Bulls could go that route. But for me personally, if I'm choosing one over the other, I do like Ayo's versatility more on defense, as well as just being a bigger guard, like his size and his frame, to have more upside for the long haul. I'm basically looking at this from a higher upside potential, and I see more of that from Ayo over Trey Jones. This next take comes to us from Ball Brains. We're not mid. The idea that fans are so conditioned to mediocrity that they think we shouldn't be celebrating this team is sad. Yeah, we're floating around the 10 seed, but it's not DeRozan, Levine, and Vooch dragging us there. We're doing it with a young core, real identity, which we were lacking in 2022, and actual progress. Fans are so focused on the standings that we've missed the bigger picture. The rebuild has already started. It's not just coming in the form of 60 losses and lottery praying. So it actually brings me joy that I'm not the only one who feels this way and has been beating this drum most of the season. I'm not sure there is a hot take per se in there. Well, I guess the hot take is you're saying we're not mid. And I 100% agree with this. Because to me, while the Bulls are by definition quote-unquote mid when you look at the standings and where they're at, but being mid is different when it's being done by a young team that still hasn't fully developed and realized its potential. I mean, look at the early years of Derrick Rose and Joakim Noah before Tibbs took over. The Bulls were finishing the 7th and 8th seed, and no one was complaining about how they weren't bottoming out and tanking to try to get a high draft pick, and that it was pointless for them to finish with the 8th seed in the East. Or take the Oklahoma City Thunder just a couple years ago, when they were a play-in team before they broke out. You didn't hear people griping about how they should be losing as many games as possible to try and get a top prospect. Being mid hits different when you're seeing progress and improvement from a young team. Yeah, when the Bulls can't crack 500 with DeMar, Zach, Vooch on the roster with high expectations, that is a problem and never a place a team should want to be. You don't want to be mid when you have championship aspirations and little to no young assets on your team, kind of like the Suns, Kings, or Mavericks this year. So yes, I absolutely agree. This notion that we're all just okay being mid, that we've been conditioned to enjoy mediocrity, is not what's happening. If this was last year's Bulls team or the year before that, and we were saying, oh yeah, this team is okay, I like this, I like where the Bulls are at, I'm okay with this, then yes, that would be settling and being okay with mediocrity. Not when you have, for all intents and purposes, a rebuild currently happening and said young players, said youth movement is performing better than expected. That is what you should want in any given rebuild, is for it to be going faster and better than expected and getting on a path to relevance and winning again sooner than anticipated. A rebuild does not always need to be bottoming out and being one of the worst teams in the league for multiple seasons to get you there. Next up, we've got this hot take, which is interesting. The Bulls have the third best young core behind the Pistons and the Magic. I don't know if I would go that far. I do agree the Pistons probably have the brightest young core, but what about the Oklahoma City Thunder? I mean, that's still a very young team with SGA as the heart and franchise player of their young core, but Chet Holmgren, Jalen Williams, SGA, to me, that's still way better of a core than what the Bulls' young core have. And then if you consider, De'Aaron Fox, still a young piece, and the fact that the Spurs have arguably the best young generational talent level prospect in Victor Wembanyama, he alone probably makes the Spurs' young core better than the Bulls. I'm not saying the Bulls aren't up there, especially with the rise in success from Coby and Giddey and the future potential of Manas Buzelis, but I think it's a stretch to say the Bulls have the third best young core in the league. And by the way, I don't think the Magic core is that bright, but you guys know how I feel about the Magic's core. I'm not as high on those guys compared to what others around the league think. Next up, we've got this one. The Bulls will give the Cavs a 6 to 7 game series if they make it through the play-in. Now, I got a lot of similar takes regarding the Bulls making it to the playoffs and how the Bulls will make it a series against the Cavs, so I'm consolidating all those into this take. Here's the thing. If the Bulls continue to play the way they have been, keeping up the energy, the pace on both ends of the floor, they're going to be going into the play-in riding with the most confidence, more so than teams that are likely going to be going up against them in the Heat, Magic, or the Hawks. So if the Bulls do in fact maintain this level of play, and that it's not just some hot stretch that dies down quickly, then there is no doubt in my mind they will make it out of the play-in and into the playoffs, because the way this team plays, they're better than the way the Heat and the Magic have been playing recently. Now, when it comes to going up against the Cavs and making it a series, I wouldn't go that far. I could see them winning a game, at most 2 games, but I don't think they would take the Cavs to 7 games, and they're certainly not going to beat them in the first round. That said, I do think the Bulls would fare better against the Cavs and the Boston Celtics. I like the matchup better, and I still think the Cavs, as good as they have been in the regular season, are kind of pretenders and won't be making a deep run in the playoffs. I mean, the Bulls will fight, though, if they make it to the playoffs. I do know that. That's one thing I've appreciated about this team, is we know they're going to play hard no matter what. Next up, we've got a hot take via ESPN 1000, a hot take they heard on a call where the caller said Coby White is a top 20 player in the league. I mean, look, the way Coby is playing right now, in this stretch of games post All-Star break, sure, you could argue he's in that tier. However, in order to truly be considered a top 20 player, top 15, top 10, whatever, you have to show that you can be that type of player consistently, not just doing it for short stretches, not even just doing it for a whole season, but through multiple seasons, consistently demonstrating that you're on that level. And Coby just isn't there yet. That's not to say he can't get there. Like, if he keeps up this level of play, conference player of the week status, if he does that for the rest of the season and all of next season, then okay, we're talking, but we need to see it being done from Coby over a longer stretch before we start making claims that he's a top 20 player in the league. Keeping things with Coby White, I thought this was an interesting take as well. Coby can't contort his body and doesn't quite have the speed of Derrick Rose, but the trickery he uses via his handles to get to the basket is jaw-dropping. It's funny because I was actually thinking this the other day and watching Coby and saying to myself how some of these plays that he's doing remind me of Rose. He's obviously not as athletic as D Rose, not as explosive, and didn't have the acceleration or hops that Rose does, but the way that he's finishing at the basket, where you're like, there's no way that's going in, kind of brings me back to the days of Rose where I was constantly dumbfounded with how easy he made it look to score. And we've been seeing that more recently with Coby and just how great he's been in scoring at the basket. Next hot take, we've got this one saying the Bulls make a run at Kevin Durant this summer. Yeah, no. That's not going to happen. I actually think, or should I say hope anyway, that AK has learned from his mistake of trying to accelerate a rebuild prematurely and depleting your future assets for players that didn't have the long-term horizon that you're looking for. Kevin Durant, as great as he still is, one of the greatest scorers in the history of the game, he's 36. He'll be 37 by the time next season starts. He's on a max contract that is expiring at the end of next season. The only way the Bulls get Kevin Durant is if they offer him an extension, which we know the Bulls aren't going to do because it would put them over the tax in the future once they extend Coby and Josh Giddey. And look, the Bulls have a good thing going right now. They don't need to screw that up by trading away most of their future to get an aging Kevin Durant who probably has 1 or 2 more good seasons left in his career. Next, we've got a warm take. Giddey should be a top candidate for Most Improved Player of the Year. The hot take is if this team does not win the 7th or 8th seed come playoffs, they should look to trade Coby and sign and trade Giddey for as much as we can get. Ideal time to try a new strategy. Well, let me start with the hot take because I do think that this ascendance we're seeing from Coby and Giddey is going to lead to a very interesting offseason for the Bulls and how they approach things. Because while I think it would be insane to trade Coby at this point, you're also talking about his trade value being at its peak right now with the way he's playing and the contract that he's on. That said, to say, well, we should just trade Coby and do a sign and trade for Giddey to try a new strategy. You want to try a new strategy when the Bulls have finally, for the first time in a long time, look like they have something going, something they can actually work with for the future? I mean, maybe if you're able to get an insane haul for one of them, you maybe move one of them because eventually you have to consider the potential impact from a cap perspective in paying both of those guys, but not both. No, you can't trade both of them. That's going to set you back years when you're trading away your 2 best players and all you have to look forward to is Modest Buzelis. Now, as far as the warm take, I agree, and I tweeted this a couple weeks back, that if Giddey continues this level of play for the rest of the season, he should be a candidate for Most Improved Player of the Year. He won't win it because he didn't show this level of play throughout the whole season, but he absolutely should get some votes as he's having quite the jump from last season, which was a bit of a down year for him. All right, the next one. Coby White is better than Tyrese Halliburton. Oh man, I normally would say this is incredibly reactionary and prisoner of the moment type of hot take. And while I still wouldn't put Coby ahead of Halliburton yet, I do see the argument, even from an unbiased fan perspective, because Halliburton is having slightly a bit of a down year. He hasn't really been the same since that hot streak to start last season. Halliburton is obviously a better playmaker, arguably one of the best passers in the game. Coby is a better scorer, and I would argue has been a more versatile scorer now that he's shown he can score at all 3 levels outside of just 3-point shooting. Again, I don't think Coby is at that level where we can say definitively he's better than Tyrese Halliburton, but it may not be as hot of a take as some of you might think it is. Anyway, guys, I'm going to end it there for this edition of your Bulls Hot Takes, but you let me know your thoughts on some of these takes as well. Keep the takes coming. Bulls are back at the United Center tomorrow to take on the Lakers once again. Until then, guys, as always, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.